So when she walked up to you, what exactly did she say?
She said I needed to leave.
Like right then?
Like I didn't work here.
So she was trying to force you out?
Yes.
Stop talking to me like I'm stupid!
She kept saying she knows how businesses work because of her title.
You
What
people
title?
don't understand how authority works!
Did you feel threatened?
The officer's body camera shakes as he steps onto the driveway, but the most jarring thing isn't the movement, it's the sound of Grady's voice, heavy with a kind of tiredness that sleep can't fix. He doesn't look up at first, just keeps his eyes locked on the wooden porch boards. She had 6 public safety guys holding her down just last Wednesday or Thursday, he says, his voice cracking slightly. He describes a scene that sounds more like a horror movie than a home, his wife, Jolene, strapped to a hospital bed by her arms and ankles because she was fighting so hard during a seizure. It is a terrifying image, a woman losing total control of her mind and body, and Grady has had a front row seat to all of it. He isn't telling the police this to be mean, he is telling them because he is terrified of what happens when she wakes up and the bottle is empty. The chaos of that night at the hospital wasn't an accident, it was the result of another long, dark relapse into drinking. Now, sitting in the quiet afternoon sun, Grady looks like a man waiting for the next explosion. He mentions that she has been recorded 3 times before, a digital trail of a life falling apart. The stakes are higher than just a loud argument. Grady admits that he's lived through threats on his life and hers, even moments where she fantasized about something far worse than a shouting match. Every word out of his mouth feels like a heavy weight being dropped, revealing a history of abuse that has finally pushed him to call for help. He's done trying to hide the bruises and the broken promises. As the officer stands there, the silence between Grady's words says just as much as the stories themselves. This is a home where that safe space disappeared a long time ago. The police cruiser pulls up to a yellow house with white pillars that looks peaceful from the outside, but the air feels heavy as the officers step out. They find Grady sitting on the front porch steps, leaning forward with his hands clasped together, looking completely drained of energy. He doesn't stand up to greet them, he just looks up with a gaze that shows he has reached his absolute limit. "What's going on?" one officer asks, and Grady takes a deep breath before trying to explain the mess inside his home. He immediately warns the police not to listen to his mother-in-law, who is already hovering nearby, because she wasn't there when the violence started. The officers can see that Grady is genuinely upset, his voice shaking as he tries to stay calm while the bodycam records every word. He tells them he has been at a baseball game for 6 hours and came home to a nightmare. He found a bottle of wine on the counter, a sign that his wife Jolene had broken her promise to stay sober again. When he tried to take the drink away from her, the situation turned physical in an instant. The porch, which should be a place for a family to relax, has become the stage for a police investigation. As the officers stand over him, Grady looks less like a man reporting a crime and more like a man who is mourning the loss of the life he thought he had. Grady leans back against the porch railing, looking out at the yard as he describes his day before it all went wrong. He tells the officer that he had spent 6 long hours at the baseball field with his son. It was supposed to be a normal, positive day of coaching and being a dad, far away from the tension that usually fills his house. He explains that for those few hours, everything felt right, and he could almost forget about the constant worry waiting for him at home. But the peace ended the moment he pulled into the driveway. Grady describes walking through the front door and seeing a bottle of wine sitting right on the counter. His heart sank because he knew exactly what that bottle meant. Jolene had relapsed again. He tells the police that he found her yelling and screaming, already lost to the alcohol. The contrast between the happy afternoon at the ball field and the chaotic scene in his kitchen was too much to handle. He was still wearing his baseball gear, a reminder of the normal life he was trying to build, even as his home life was falling apart right in front of him. Grady stays seated on the porch, but he uses his hands to show exactly what happened. He explains that when he got home, the argument started almost immediately because of the wine. He didn't want Jolene to keep drinking, so he reached out to take the plastic orange cup she was holding. He tells the officer that as soon as he tried to grab it, Jolene didn't just pull away, she intentionally jammed the hard plastic rim of the cup right into his face. He points to a small, red mark on his upper lip where the cup hit him. Grady explains that it happened so fast and with so much force that he thought he was bleeding at first. He also mentions that wine splashed all over him during the struggle, and the smell of the alcohol on his clothes is a constant reminder of the fight. Grady tells the police that he believes she did it on purpose, trying to hurt him as much as possible just because he wouldn't let her drink in peace. This wasn't just a clumsy accident. For Grady, it was the moment he realized he couldn't protect her from herself anymore. Grady looks at the officer with a heavy heart and explains that this isn't just a regular fight between a husband and wife. He reveals that Jolene is currently on court supervision. This means a judge has already ordered her to stay away from alcohol as part of her legal requirements. By finding that wine bottle on the counter, Grady knows she hasn't just broken a promise to him, she has broken the law. He explains that he has spent weeks trying to help her follow the rules because he didn't want to be the one to call the police. He was trying to protect her from the consequences of her own actions. But now, with a cut on his lip and the smell of wine in the air, he realizes his silence was only making things worse. Grady tells the officer that he can't be the one to hide her secrets anymore. By calling the cops, he is admitting that the trust between them is completely gone, and he has to put the safety of his home and his son before his desire to keep Jolene out of trouble. The officer asks Grady if he can come inside to see the evidence, and Grady leads him through the front door, telling his son to stay downstairs and keep watching movies. As they walk into the kitchen, the officer sees a mess that tells the story of a chaotic afternoon. Grady points toward the garbage can, where he found the empty bottle of wine that started the entire fight. He explains that he didn't want to call the police because he knew Jolene was on court supervision, but finding that hidden bottle was the last straw. Grady also shows the officer a plastic orange cup, the same one Jolene allegedly used to strike him in the face. He explains that when he tried to grab it from her, she jammed it into his lip and splashed wine all over his clothes. The officer looks around and notices wine stains on the counter, proving that a struggle really did happen. Grady's voice is low and steady as he explains how he tried to avoid this moment for as long as possible. Finding the hidden alcohol in the trash makes it clear to the officer that Jolene has been lying about her sobriety, making Grady's story feel much more like the truth. The officer turns his attention to Jolene, who is standing nearby looking disheveled with messy hair. She speaks with a voice that sounds tired, but her story is completely different from Grady's. She tells the officer that she was home alone all day and didn't do anything wrong. She claims that as soon as Grady came home from the baseball game, he got angry for no reason and hit her as hard as he could in her right eye. Jolene even tells the officer that she gets hit a lot, trying to make it sound like Grady is the one who is constantly violent. When the officer asks what started the argument, Jolene says she doesn't really know, which makes her story feel a bit shaky. She admits that she is an alcoholic but insists that she is fine today and was just resting and taking a shower while Grady was gone. She tells the officer that she only called her parents because she wanted to be picked up and taken to a safe space where Grady couldn't hurt her anymore. Jolene speaks softly and tries to look like a victim, hoping the police will believe her version of the truth and ignore the red mark on Grady's lip. She paints a picture of a husband who blames everything on her drinking just so he can get away with hurting her. Jolene's mother stands on the porch, watching the officers with a protective and suspicious look. She has decided to stay and give her 2 cents on the situation, claiming that there are always 2 sides to every story. She tells the officers that Jolene has reported domestic abuse in the past and that she is only there to help her daughter get to a safe place. Her presence adds a lot of tension because Grady had already warned the officers not to listen to her power-tripping family. The mother-in-law acts as if Grady is the problem, suggesting that he is using Jolene's struggle with alcohol to make her look like the bad person. She watches closely as the police talk to Jolene, making the officers feel like they are being judged while they try to do their jobs. This family power trip makes the investigation much harder because it creates a he said, she said battle between the husband and the wife's parents. Grady looks even more defeated as he realizes he isn't just fighting his wife's addiction, but also the people who are supposed to be helping her stay healthy. Jolene looks directly at the officer, her eyes wide as she tells him a very different story. She points to her right eye and claims that Grady hit her there as hard as he possibly could just 30 minutes ago. She even tells the police that this isn't the first time, saying she gets hit a lot and that she only called her parents because she wanted to be taken somewhere safe. She acts as though she is a victim of constant domestic abuse, trying to make the officers believe that Grady is a violent man who is using her drinking as an excuse to hurt her. The officers listen carefully, but they start to notice things that don't match her words. While Jolene is busy telling them how she was punched, the police are looking at the red mark on Grady's lip and the wine splashed on his clothes. They also notice that Jolene doesn't have any fresh swelling or redness around her eye that would come from a hard hit. Her claim that he used his palm to strike her feels practiced, but the lack of actual injury on her face makes the officers wonder if she is just trying to win the argument by getting Grady in trouble first. While Jolene continues to claim that Grady recently assaulted her, the officers begin to look closer at the bruises on her arms. They notice that these marks aren't fresh, red, or swollen like a new injury would be, and instead, they are yellow and purple, showing that they are already in the middle of healing. One officer points out that the marks look exactly like the bruising left behind by medical needles. Grady explains that just a few days ago, Jolene had a major seizure on their back porch because she was trying to detox from alcohol alone at home. He tells the police that she had to be rushed to the hospital, where it took 6 people to hold her down while medical staff tried 6 different times to put an 4 into her arm. He explains that every bruise she is currently showing off as abuse is actually a mark from the doctors who were trying to save her life. By sharing this medical history, Grady reveals how Jolene is trying to weaponize her own health crisis to frame him for a crime he didn't commit. The officers realize that the evidence Jolene is using to get Grady arrested is actually proof of her own dangerous struggle with addiction. Grady's voice drops to a whisper as he tells the officer about a much scarier night from their past. He explains that calling the police today wasn't an easy choice, but he had to do it because of how dangerous things have become. He reveals that during a previous argument, while he was actually on the phone with emergency dispatchers, Jolene reached into the kitchen counter and grabbed a heavy knife from the wooden knife block. He remembers the sheer terror of that moment, watching his wife hold a weapon while she threatened to hurt him. He asks the officer if the dispatchers recorded that call because he wants there to be proof of just how far Jolene is willing to go when she is drinking. This isn't just about a plastic cup anymore, it's about a pattern of life-threatening behavior. Grady explains that Jolene has even talked about killing him or herself in the past. By sharing the story of the knife block, Grady shows the police that his home has become a place of constant fear. He tells them that he has spent years trying to hide these dark moments to protect her, but he realizes now that Jolene's addiction has made her capable of terrible violence. The officer listens to Jolene's story, but as he looks at her, he starts to feel that something is not right. She keeps talking about how Grady hit her in the face just a little while ago, but her skin does not show the signs of a fresh injury. There is no new swelling, no redness, and no marks that look like they happened today. Instead, the bruises he sees are yellow and greenish, which means they are old and already healing. He looks back and forth between Jolene's calm face and Grady's cut lip. While Jolene says she is the one in danger, Grady is the one who actually looks hurt and exhausted. The officer remembers what Grady said about the hospital visit and the struggle with the medical needles. He begins to doubt Jolene because her story about being hit as hard as possible does not match the way her face looks. He realizes that she might be using old injuries to tell a new lie, trying to trick the police into taking her side. This doubt changes everything, as the officer stops seeing her as a victim and starts seeing her as someone who is hiding the truth. The officer returns to Jolene, but this time his voice is firm. He tells her that he has seen the evidence in the house and it does not match her story. He looks her in the eye and asks her point blank about the wine, the bottle in the trash and the cup that was full of alcohol. Jolene immediately shakes her head and says, "That's not true," trying to deny that there was any alcohol involved at all. The officer doesn't back down. He points out that there is wine splashed all over the kitchen counter and an empty bottle that was clearly used today. He explains to her that Grady has a real cut on his lip that looks like it came from the cup she was holding. When he asks how Grady got that injury, Jolene tries to change the subject by claiming her husband drinks a lot too. She repeats her claim that he hit her with his palm, but the officer reminds her that her bruises are old and look like they came from fir needles at the hospital, not a fight today. By catching her in these lies, the officer makes it clear that he no longer believes her version of what happened. The officer looks at Jolene with a serious expression and explains that the situation has moved past just a simple argument. He tells her that because there are clear signs of injury on Grady, specifically the cut on his lip, he no longer has a choice in what happens next. He explains that in the state of Illinois, the law is very strict about domestic violence. When the police see a physical injury during a domestic call, they are mandated by the state to make an arrest. Jolene tries to argue, but the officer calmly tells her, "I don't have a choice in this." He explains that the state says the police must take action to keep everyone safe when things turn violent. He tells her that she will be going back to the station to be processed and will eventually be moved to the DuPage County Jail. Jolene is shocked to hear that she won't be going home with her parents, but the officer explains that she will have to stay in jail until she can see a judge in the morning. Grady watches from the porch, seeing the legal system take over a situation that he could no longer handle on his own. The sound of the metal handcuffs clicking shut echoes across the quiet street. Jolene looks down at her wrists, her eyes filling with tears as the reality of the situation finally hits her. She quickly asks the officer if he can put the handcuffs in front of her body instead of behind her back, but he tells her it is not possible. He explains that it is the police department's policy to keep handcuffs in the back while a person is inside the patrol car for everyone's safety. She looks at her parents, her voice trembling as she begs for mercy and asks why she is being put in jail right now. The officer stays calm and patient, telling her that the station is only 3 blocks away and that he will take the cuffs off as soon as they get there. He leads her toward the back seat of the cruiser, while Jolene continues to cry and ask questions about how this could be happening to her. Grady stands back, watching his wife being led away in the back of a police car, a sight he had tried to prevent for many years. The officers help her into the seat, close the door, and prepare for the short drive that marks the end of Jolene's freedom for the night. The police car pulls away from the house, leaving the neighborhood quiet once again. For Jolene, the night is just beginning as she is taken to the station to be processed. She is then transported to the DuPage County Jail, where the reality of her choices finally sinks in. She is charged with domestic battery, a serious crime that means she cannot simply go home or have her parents pick her up. Instead of sleeping in her own bed, she has to spend the night in a cold jail cell, waiting to see a pre-trial judge in the morning. Back at the house, Grady is left with a heavy silence. While he is safe from the yelling and the physical attacks, there is no joy in winning this fight. He is left to deal with the mess in the kitchen and the heartbreak of explaining to his son why his mother isn't coming home tonight. The safe space everyone was talking about turned out to be a jail cell for Jolene and a lonely, broken home for Grady. Even though the police have left and the handcuffs are on, the struggle with addiction is far from over. This night in jail is a somber reminder that in a house divided by alcohol and abuse, there are no real winners, only people left trying to pick up the pieces.